All right, let's get right into it. We are about to tackle one of the most brilliant, most profound, and honestly, most mind-blowing ideas in the entire history of human thought. We're talking about Kurt Gödel's Incompleteness Theorem. This is the discovery that completely rewrote the rules for math, for logic, and for our very understanding of what truth even is.
So, let me ask you this. Do you think it's possible to create one single perfect rule book? A set of instructions so complete that it could solve and decide every single true statement in the universe? A kind of master key for all of knowledge? Well, for a long time, that was the ultimate dream, and it's right where our story begins.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at that dream of perfection. Then, we'll see how Gödel came up with a secret language to make math talk about itself. Next up is the impossible sentence, the one that breaks the whole system. After that, I'll walk through the logic, the inescapable truth, and finally, we'll explore what it all means with truth beyond proof.
Okay, so let's start with that dream. Picture it. It's the early 20th century, and some of the most brilliant minds on the planet are on this epic quest. Their goal? To create a single, flawless rulebook for all of mathematics. A foundation so rock solid that every possible truth could be built on top of it with absolute, unshakable certainty. Now, the fancy term for this rulebook is a formal system. But honestly, the best way to get your head around it is to just think about Legos. Imagine you have this super strict instruction manual. It tells you every single type of brick that exists, the exact ways they're allowed to connect, and it even gives you a few little structures to start with. The one golden rule is you can only build what that manual allows, nothing else.
And this perfect rule book, this perfect Lego manual, had a very specific wish list. Number one, it had to be complete. That means if a structure was true, you could definitely build it using the rules. Two, it had to be consistent, which is crucial. It means you could never, ever build something that contradicts itself, like a square that's also a circle. And three, it had to be decidable, meaning for any possible structure, the manual would give you a clear yes, you can build it, or no, you can't. This was the holy grail of logic. But then, this entire beautiful dream just came crashing down, and it was all thanks to this young, unassuming logician named Kurt Gödel. See, he found this absolutely ingenious way to make the rulebook talk about its own rules.
The easiest way to picture this is to think about barcodes. Imagine every single Lego brick gets a unique barcode, and every single rule in the instruction manual also gets a unique barcode. Well, all of a sudden, the manual can now include rules about the other rules just by referencing their barcodes. This was a game changer. For the very first time, math could look in the mirror and talk about itself. And this power of self-reference is what allowed Gödel to build a logical bomb. He constructed a single sentence, perfectly legal according to the rules, that the system was just completely powerless to handle. This is the impossible sentence. And here it is. This sentence cannot be proven using the rules in this book. Just take a second and let that sink in. It's a statement that is making a claim about its own provability. It's like a snake eating its own tail, but built with the flawless precision of mathematical logic.
This kind of weird, loopy logic feels strange, but we actually see little echoes of it all over the place. It's like a sticky note that says, "This sticky note is unremovable." Or a book chapter with the title, "This chapter is not included in this book." Gödel just figured out how to express this exact kind of paradox using the super strict language of math.
You've probably heard the old classic liar's paradox, right? I am lying. If the statement is true, then I'm lying, which means it's false. If it's false, then I'm telling the truth. It just breaks your brain. Gödel's sentence is basically a sophisticated cousin of this. But here's the crucial twist. By using the word unprovable instead of lying, it doesn't just create a simple contradiction. No, it does something much, much smarter. It reveals a deep and fundamental limitation in the system itself.
Okay, the logical trap has been set. So now we get to the really good part. Let's walk through the brilliant, airtight, and totally inescapable logic that flows from that one impossible sentence.
So we have to ask the big question. That sentence, "This sentence cannot be proven," is it actually true or is it false? There are only two possible options, right? And what's so amazing is that both of them lead to the same stunning conclusion. Let's think this through. Path number one. What happens if the system can prove the sentence? Well, hold on. The sentence itself says it's unprovable. So if the system proves it, the system has just officially proven a falsehood, a lie. That would make the whole system inconsistent, a total contradiction. So that can't be right.
Okay, let's try path number 2. What if the system cannot prove the sentence? Well, that's exactly what the sentence claims. It claims it can't be proven, and guess what? It can't be. So the sentence is telling the truth.
And right there, that is the bombshell at the heart of this discovery. We have just found a statement that is undeniably, logically true, but it can never, ever be proven using the rules of its own system. The system has a blind spot. It is, by its very nature, incomplete.
And this brings us right to the official statement of Gödel's first incompleteness theorem. What it really means is that any rule book, any formal system, as long as it's powerful enough to do basic stuff like addition and multiplication, will always contain true statements that are forever beyond its reach.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's a neat math trick, but so what? Oh, but this is so much more than a paradox. This discovery sent absolute shockwaves through mathematics, computer science, and even philosophy. Let's dig into what this really means for all of us.
Well, for starters, it means that mathematics can never be finished. There will never be a final textbook that contains all possible proofs. Second, and this one is huge, it shows us that the concept of truth is actually bigger and wider than the concept of proof. There are true things out there that we can never formally prove. It also suggests that a rigid set of algorithmic rules can never fully capture the spark of human insight. And finally, it means no system can ever use its own rules to be 100% sure that it's perfectly reliable.
And that last point leads us straight to his second theorem, which is really all about trust. So if a system can't prove every true statement, can it at least do one thing? Can it use its own rules to prove that it's trustworthy? In other words, can it prove that it's consistent and will never ever contradict itself?
Here's a great way to think about it. Imagine there's a judge, and that judge is actually on trial for a crime. And from the judge's bench, they pick up the gavel, bang it, and declare, "Case closed. I am innocent." Would you trust that verdict? No way, right? Of course not, because you can't be the judge of your own case. And it's the same for logic. A system cannot use its own internal rules to prove its own reliability. You always need an outside perspective to vouch for it.
So to just put this whole journey in perspective, the early 1900s kicked off with this incredible dream of finding a perfect, complete system for all of truth. Then in 1931, Kurt Gödel comes along and proves that the dream is mathematically impossible, and today we are still living in the aftermath, grappling with how his work profoundly impacts everything from artificial intelligence to the very limits of what we can know.
So if there's one image to take away from all this, it's this one. The world of what is provable by any given set of rules is always going to be just one part of the much, much larger, maybe even infinite world of what is actually true.
And that leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to just chew on. Gödel proved that any formal system of logic we can write down on paper is necessarily incomplete. So, if that's true for the systems we create, what does that say about the logical systems running inside our own minds?